Welcome to 1700s Amsterdam, a city where the streets glittered like gold, as long as you could ignore the horse manure, the open sewers, and the unmistakable aroma of pickled herring drifting through the air. This was the Venice of the North, where being fabulously wealthy wasn't just about owning a Grand Canal house. It was about making sure nobody guessed your fortune came from smuggling tulip bulbs. Tonight, we're stepping into the silk-lined shoes of Amsterdam's elite, the city's original one-percenters. Back when the Dutch East India Company ruled the seas, and working from home meant yelling at your servants from 3 floors up. So, before you turn your bed into a miniature Dutch trading post, get comfortable. Dim the lights. Let the fan hum like a distant canal breeze, and stretch out like a 1700s merchant resting on his mountain of gold, or, if you must, your memory foam mattress. Now, imagine this. You're rich, obscenely rich. So rich that someone's full-time job is to polish your doorknob. Do you get your own private canal, or just fight for parking space with a flotilla of neighbors? How do you show off your wealth when everyone already owned a Rembrandt? Did the rich actually bathe? Or was hygiene just a matter of perfume and strategic lighting? What did they eat? How did they sleep? If at all, in a city powered entirely by gossip, gin, and questionable business ethics. Congratulations, it's 1702. You've just woken up filthy rich in Amsterdam. You live on Amsterdam's fanciest canal. Your wig is taller than most small children, and the neighbors are definitely watching. Good luck. Sunlight glints through stained glass windows somewhere far above your velvet-draped four-poster bed. The day begins not with an alarm, but with the polite tap-tap of your housemaid's knuckles. Because being rich means someone else has to risk seeing your morning face before you've had coffee. You stretch, yawn, and listen for the distant sound of someone else lighting your fire. Before you even contemplate opening your eyes, there's a faint shuffling as your maid tiptoes in. Try not to trip over the edge of the hand-woven Persian rug. The air is cool, but not unpleasantly so, because last night's embers have been coaxed back to life by someone who knows better than to let a merchant's toes get chilly. You sink further into feather mattresses imported from France, wrapped in blankets so soft that you briefly consider never leaving bed again. Sadly, being rich in 1700s Amsterdam doesn't come with unlimited sick days. Even the privileged have a social calendar that must be obeyed. With great effort, you peel yourself from the luxurious cocoon. Your feet land on slippers that have never seen the inside of a laundry tub, because that's what servants are for. The floor cacks. Old canal mansions have character, which is a polite way of saying every board has a unique symphony of groans that will someday be listed as charm in an estate agent's pamphlet. Somewhere in the next room, your valet is selecting your outfit for the day. Something flamboyant enough to show your wealth, yet subtle enough to suggest you're far too busy making money to care about appearances. You care. You really, really care. The maid pours a jug of fresh water into a porcelain basin. Water. She hauled up 4 flights of stairs because indoor plumbing is still a fantasy, and the only pipes in this house are the ones you smoke. You splash your face, taking care not to wet the lace cuffs of your nightshirt. The water is brisk, jolting you into consciousness faster than even the strongest coffee, which, by the way, is being brewed at this very moment by the kitchen staff. You inhale deeply. If wealth had a smell, it would be a mix of wood, smoke, soap, and the faint, tangy whiff of last night's cheese. By now, a second servant appears with a tray. Coffee, hot chocolate, maybe a slice of spice cake if you've been particularly agreeable to your spouse lately. You sip the coffee, dark and potent, while staring out at the city. The view from your bedroom is a panorama of elegant gabled rooftops, chimneys belching Woodham smoke, and a canal sparkling below, lined with merchant ships, laundry flapping from every window, and at least one dog of indeterminate ownership barking at a duck. The first challenge of the day, dressing. The process is not a solo endeavor. Your valet enters with a selection of garments so elaborate that putting them on requires choreography stamina, and at least 3 strategically placed pins. Starched linen shirt, silk stockings, breeches, waistcoat, coat, layers upon layers, each one screaming, I have disposable income. The pièce de resistance, of course, is your wig, which is perched atop a mannequin head like a small furry tribute to architectural excess. It is powdered, fluffed, and wrestled onto your scalp by professionals. Sometimes, as you glance at yourself in the mirror, you wonder if you're a person or just a very ornate hat-rack with delusions of grandeur while you're being outfitted like a particularly well-fed marionette. The city is already bustling. Outside, the sounds of Amsterdam morning drift in, clopping hooves on brick, the distant clang of ship bells, the muttered Dutch of canal workers arguing about eels, and somewhere the high-pitched trill of someone already complaining about the price of pepper. You look forward to none of it and all of it. That's the paradox of 18th century wealth. You're insulated from discomfort, but never from expectation. You amble into the dining room to the scent of coffee so strong it could power a windmill and cheese that's older than some countries. The table is piled high with fresh bread, butter, and because you're wealthy, a smuggled orange. Your biggest challenge, not getting crumbs on your brocade robe. The dining room itself is an ode to Amsterdam opulence. Sunlight slants through enormous windows, painting golden squares across your parquet floors, which, by the way, have never known the indignity of muddy boots. The walls are lined with landscapes and portraits, ancestors who stare down at your breakfast, silently judging your choice of jam. Crystal decanters catch the light. Everything on display reminds you, and anyone else lucky enough to be invited, that you have both money and taste, or at the very least a relative with good taste and a generous inheritance. Your breakfast chair cacks as you sit, a high back to fare with intricate carvings and just enough padding to suggest comfort, was at least considered if not fully achieved before you. The morning feast awaits. The bread is fresh, still warm from the baker's oven, its crust dusted with flour. There are curls of sweet cream butter, dishes of stewed fruit, and enough cheese to construct a modest barricade should a hungry neighbor invade. There's even a bowl of figs, the ultimate status symbol, because nothing says, I have money, quite like eating something that crossed half of Europe on the back of a donkey. A servant materializes, gliding silently to pour your coffee. It's dark, rich, and served in a porcelain cup, so thin you can practically see through it. A subtle reminder that your wealth allows you to drink your caffeine from tiny works of art. You inhale the steam and contemplate how many fortunes have been made and lost in this city over a morning cup. The Dutch East India Company may have its critics, but you're too busy enjoying the spoils to notice. Let's talk cheese for a moment, because you are now living in the undisputed cheese capital of the universe. Gouda, Edam, Leyden, wheels, and wedges in every shade of yellow, each more pungent than the last. Your table is a cheese lover's fever dream and a lactose intolerant's worst nightmare. There's something oddly competitive about the cheese display. You find yourself eyeing the size of your neighbor's wheel at yesterday's breakfast, just in case you need to up your game. Wealth in Amsterdam isn't just about gold or houses. It's about how many varieties of cheese you can identify before noon. And then there's the orange. Exotic, juicy, and staggeringly expensive. This little fruit represents a shipping network that spans the known world. It didn't arrive here by accident. It braved storms, pirates, customs officials, and the sticky fingers of every deckhand from Lisbon to Amsterdam. You peel it slowly, savoring the scent, knowing that this act alone could spark envy in half the city. Peeling an orange at breakfast is the 1700s version of posting a vacation selfie. Subtle, smug, and just a bit showy. Of course, no proper breakfast is complete without gossip. Your spouse arrives already armed with news of the latest shipping delays, scandalous affairs, and rumors of a merchant who lost everything betting on nutmeg futures. You listen politely, nodding where appropriate, but your mind is elsewhere, calculating profits, plotting investments, and wondering if the coffee house crowd will be especially spicy today. Your mansion is basically an ant farm with uniforms. From maids dusting Delftware to cooks arguing about eels, there's an entire cast of characters dedicated to making sure you never have to butter your own toast. It's Downtown Abbey, but with more gene and legal weed. Every morning, while you're still nestled in feather beds and pondering whether it's worth getting up before the fire is truly roaring, your home has already transformed into a living, breathing machine of human industry. Down in the kitchen, the cook is barking orders with the authority of an admiral, wrangling a team of scullery maids and footmen as they orchestrate breakfast like a military campaign. If military campaigns involved quite so many onions and an alarming amount of shouting about proper eel gutting technique above stairs, the housekeeper leads her own brigade. She's the true general of domestic order, armed with a ring of keys and an uncanny ability to spot dust from 20 paces. She inspects linen closets, checks for smudges on the leaded glass, and holds the entire staff in a gentle but unbreakable grip of respect and well-founded terror. If you ever hear a shriek from the hallway, it's probably a junior maid who just tried to polish silver with vinegar instead of chalk. She'll learn. Everywhere you turn, there's someone quietly making your life easier. Parliamentade, smoothing wrinkles from velvet curtains. A butler who knows your breakfast routine better than you do, right down to the ratio of sugar in your coffee and the precise thickness of your toast. Valet and ladies' maids hover, ready to fetch, carry, and if necessary, intervene in a household emergency. Like when your wig powder explodes 5 minutes before a dinner party, leaving you looking like a ghost who overslept. In the background, a constant ballet unfolds. Buckets of water are carted up narrow staircases. Fireplaces are coaxed to life, and someone somewhere is always vigorously beating a rug, sending clouds of ancient dust billowing out over the canal. The windows are polished so often that even the ducks swimming by can admire their reflections. It's a miracle anything in the house stays still at all. But that's the paradox of wealth. Stillness is only possible because so many people are quietly moving around you. Not that the staff are always as silent and invisible as etiquette demands. You catch snatches of gossip as maids pass in the hallway. The gardener's tragic love life, speculation about which neighbor has been sneaking extra pastries, and heated debates about whether herring really counts as breakfast food or a cruel prank on newcomers. If you want to know what's really going on in Amsterdam, politics, economics, scandal, just eavesdrop near the kitchen door for 10 minutes. Your servants have a better intelligence network than the East India Company. The head cook, meanwhile, is an institution unto herself. She controls the kitchen with an iron fist and a wooden spoon, occasionally threatening exile to Rotterdam for anyone who burns the bread. She's the reason your table overflows with delicacies. Your cellars are stocked with salted fish, and no one dares to serve undercooked eel. If you're lucky, she'll slip you an extra almond tart. If you're unlucky, she'll glare at you until you lose your appetite. Either way, you do not want to get on her bad side. Owning a canal house is the 18th century equivalent of parking a Lamborghini in your living room. Your address alone screams, I have more money than taste. But inside, it's all about peacock feather wallpaper, gold leaf everything, and a chandelier that could concuss a horse if it fell. Walking up to your grand front door, you can't help but notice the ever-watchful eyes of the neighborhood. In Amsterdam, your canal house isn't just a place to sleep. It's a stage. Every brick, every window, every aggressively symmetrical gable is designed for maximum look-at-me effect. The door itself is painted a shade of green. So expensive the pigment probably required a small colonial war to acquire. And don't even get started on the doorknob, polished daily by your unfortunate footman. It's the size of a toddler's head and as shiny as a banker's conscience. Step inside and your senses are immediately assaulted by a symphony of rich Bears decor. The entryway is flawed in marble you absolutely do not want to walk on with wet shoes, flanked by two life-sized busts of ancestors who, if you're honest, probably just own a successful pickle business. The air smells faintly of beeswax polish, tulips, and ambition. To your left, the reception room, designed exclusively for showing off to other rich people. The walls are clad in rare woods, imported at great expense, from somewhere only vaguely known to the Dutch East India Company. Overhead, the chandelier glitters menacingly, daring anyone to sneeze or stand up too quickly. The rug beneath your feet, hand-knotted naturally, and worth more than most entire city blocks. Guests are expected to compliment it, and if they don't, you might have them seated closer to the draft. The living spaces are a fever dream of peacock feathers, Chinese porcelain, Delft ware, and whatever the latest cargo ship unloaded. There's always a fine balance between sophisticated world traveler and magpie with a large credit line. You have more vases than flowers, more paintings than wall space, and at least 3 clocks that never tell the right time, but do serve as excellent conversation starters. The staircases are narrow because Amsterdam houses were taxed on their width, not their depth, so guests must choose between clinging to the railings or risking death by fashion as they maneuver around your collection of awkwardly placed marble urns. The parlor, your pride and joy, is awash with gold leaf and elaborate tapestries. Here you receive visitors and subtly remind them how many Rembrandts you've acquired this season. You strategically position your least favorite chair under the leaky section of ceiling in case rivals drop by. Each painting, every porcelain figurine is a not-so-humble brag about your worldliness, connections, and ability to buy things your neighbors can only dream of stealing. But the real flex is the view. Your canal-facing windows are kept spotlessly clean. The curtain's always drawn, just so. This isn't just to let in the light. It's to make sure passers-by get a clear look at your priceless collection of blue and white ceramics, and that hand-carved Italian harpsichord you've never actually played. On summer days, you lounge by the window with a book you have no intention of reading, hoping to be spotted by anyone important floating past in their barge. You step into a closet the size of a modern apartment and contemplate your options. A velvet suit embroidered with enough silver thread to short out the city, or a more understated casual ensemble that still requires 3 people to help you get dressed. And don't forget your wig, which might require its own carriage. This is Amsterdam in the early 1700s, where dressing yourself is not a task, but a multi-act performance. One that starts the moment your valet sweeps open your wardrobe and ends, possibly with an intervention from the local tour. If you get too creative with color combinations, you might think the point of fashion is comfort or utility, but you'd be wrong. The point of fashion here is to remind everyone everywhere that you are absolutely indisputably loaded. Let's start with the basics. Shirts of fine linen, wider than your sense of moral ambiguity, starched to a point that could leave a mark if you gnawed too quickly. Stockings pulled so tight your calves could pass for imported porcelain. Then breeches tailored, of course, in colors that make sure no one mistakes you for anything less than a titan of trade. A waistcoat brocaded and embroidered with enough real silver thread to pay for a small country's national debt is the next layer. There's no such thing as overdressed, only underfunded. As you slip into your jacket, you wonder if this much fabric is strictly necessary. It isn't. But fashion in 1700s, Amsterdam is less about personal preference and more about public spectacle. The richer you are, the more visible your discomfort should be. Anyone can be comfortable. It takes real money to be this itchy in this much silk. The pièce de resistance, of course, is the wig. You don't simply put on a wig. You become the wig. This one towers above your natural hairline, powdered to the consistency of freshly fallen snow, scented with lavender, and woven with enough horsehair to start a modest cavalry. It takes the combined effort of your valet and 2 assistants just to settle it on your head without sending your posture into early retirement. If your wig doesn't graze the ceiling at least once a week, you're not aiming high enough. Bonus points if it attracts curious birds during garden parties. For special occasions, there are options. The Maritime Magnate, a powdered confection with nautical motifs and the distinct risk of knocking over candlesticks, or the tulip craze, festooned with artificial flowers and subtle reminders that you survived the bubble. Each wig is not just an accessory, but a personal billboard for your wealth and willingness to ignore the limitations of basic neck strength. Of course, all of this takes time. You don't simply get dressed. You are assembled, buttons are fastened, sashes are adjusted, and your cravat is tied in a manner that suggests both sophistication and a mild disregard for the passage of air. Jewelry is considered rings for every finger, a signet in case you need to stamp an urgent letter, and a watch on a chain, mostly for show, because you're far too important to care about the actual time. For women, the stakes are even higher. Gowns in imported silks and satins layered like architectural masterpieces, supported by petticoats and stays that require a team of maids and a prayer to street Apollonia just to fasten. Lace imported from Flanders, gloves so tight you may never get them off, and shoes so small and decorative that walking becomes a bold act of faith. And of course, the towering powder coiffure, sometimes adorned with pearls, sometimes with tiny ships, because why not accessorize with a reminder of your shipping fortune? Baths are suspiciously rare, but perfumes are everywhere. You spritz yourself with eau de toilette that costs more than most people's annual rent, and call it a day. Cleanliness is next to godliness, but in Amsterdam, smelling rich is more important than actually being clean. Let's set the scene. You're standing in front of a mirror framed by gold leaf, wearing a dressing gown so plush it could double as window insulation. The sun is filtering through lace curtains, illuminating a dazzling array of tiny bottles cut glass imported from Venice, each holding some mysterious, flammable, and possibly toxic liquid. You pick your favorite scent, a heady mixture of rose water, ambergris, and whatever the chemist had left over on discount. One generous splash, and voila, you're now more fragrant than a spice market and twice as flammable. Why all the fuss about perfume? Because water in 1700s Amsterdam is the enemy. The canals, while picturesque, are essentially glorified open sewers. The drinking water is slightly less dangerous than playing hopscotch blindfolded on a frozen canal. Bathing, especially in winter, requires hauling bucket after bucket of dubious water upstairs, heating it over a smoky fire, and filling a copper tub. You'll regret sitting in the moment you remember who bathed last. By the time you finish the whole production, you're cold, tired, and only marginally cleaner than when you started. Instead, the wealthy develop a different solution. The art of olfactory deception. Perfumes, scented powders, and herbal sachets tucked into every garment and under every wig. A polite visitor in your parlor is greeted not by the faint aroma of humanity, but by a wall of floral, spicy, and musky notes that hit harder than a merchant's handshake. If you can't be clean, you might as well be fragrant enough to stun a horse. Servants, of course, handle what passes for basic hygiene. There's a morning ritual involving damp cloths, a brisk rub-down, and possibly a handful of rosemary thrown in for antibacterial purposes. Soap is a luxury used sparingly because too much will dry out your skin or so. The apothecary claims tooth powder is mostly chalk, sometimes mixed with burnt bread or crushed oyster shell. And if you're feeling daring, you might rub your teeth with sage or wine. Mouthwash, that's just a strong gulp of gin followed by a prayer for social distance. You change your linen undercloth obsessively, since the theory goes that clean linen will somehow draw out the filth from your skin. There's a constant invisible battle being waged against lice, fleas, and mysterious rashes that appear every spring like unwelcome party guests. Hair is another matter entirely. Wigs hide a multitude of sins. Underneath, it's best not to ask. Occasionally, a servant might attack your scalp with a fine tea comb and a bottle of vinegar while you stare at the ceiling and pretend you're reviewing the shipping manifest for next week's spices. For women, the hygiene game is a test of endurance. Layers of stays, petticoats, and silk gowns mean sweat has nowhere to go but sideways. Scented handkerchiefs are a must. Dab delicately under the nose. At the first whiff of city air, lavender sachets are sewn into hems and sleeves, and a well-be-bred lady never travels without a commander. Basically, a fragrant grenade of herbs, spices, and citrus peel. If things get truly desperate, you simply blame the nearest peasant and waft out of the room. Public bathhouses do exist, but the church frowns on them. Something about temptation and unseemly mingling. Besides, everyone's heard rumors about what really goes on behind those steamy doors. You'd rather risk mild stink than major scandal. Private baths are rare, so you perfect the art of the dry wash. That is, you wash what shows and hope nobody gets too close to what doesn't. You saunter to your study, really just a lair for counting coins and plotting. There are letters to answer, contracts to sign, and investments to pretend you understand. Maybe today you'll buy a share in the VOC. Or maybe you'll just speculate on the next big thing, dried rhubarb. The study itself is a temple to ambition with mahogany shelves sagging under the weight of ledgers, imported curios, and a globe so detailed it includes islands that probably don't even exist. The windows overlook the canal, the view occasionally obscured by passing barges, ambitious ducks, or a neighbor's maid hanging out laundry with suspicious speed. The room smells faintly of sealing wax, ink, and the slightly burned undertone of financial anxiety. Your desk, the control panel of your empire, is perpetually cluttered. There are piles of bills, promissory notes, last week's trade receipts, and at least 2 anonymous threats written in very polite calligraphy. Somewhere under a mountain of correspondence lies a reminder to pay your taxes. A note you've skillfully ignored for 3 weeks now, hoping that the city's accountants are as easily distracted as you are. First order of business. Correspondence. The mail arrives in a flutter of wax-sealed envelopes, smelling of far-off lands and bad spelling. Some letters are from distant trading partners. Requests for ships, spices, or more credit. Always more credit. There's a petition from a cousin who's convinced you'll want to invest in unicorn insurance, and a polite warning from your lawyer about the perils of putting your name on any more gambling debts, even if they are technically for charity. You sign documents with a flourish, always checking twice that you're not inadvertently selling your best warehouse or promising to marry off your eldest daughter to a Portuguese tobacco baron. Your signature is more valuable than some currencies, and you wield it with the kind of care normally reserved for juggling lit candles in a fireworks factory. Then comes the financial speculation, a sport in Amsterdam that makes modern stock trading look like a friendly game of checkers. You scan the day's prices for sugar, nutmeg, coffee, and those infamous tulip bulbs. In your more reckless moods, you've even considered branching into cocoa beans or that newfangled tea everyone's talking about. Each investment is equal parts calculation and daredevil act. Are you a financial genius or just very, very lucky? The answer shifts by the hour. If you're feeling particularly audacious, you'll visit the exchange, a chaotic, echoing hall full of men waving contracts, shouting bids, and swearing eternal vengeance over the price of cinnamon. It's the beating heart of Amsterdam's economy, and possibly the loudest room in Europe. Here, fortunes are made and lost before lunch, and a well-placed rumor can trigger a panic that ripples from Java to the North Sea. Sometimes you host meetings in your study, city officials seeking favors, business partners hoping to curry your support, and distant relatives offering advice you absolutely didn't ask for. These sessions are equal parts negotiation and theater, complete with flattery, veiled insults, and at least one dramatic coffee spill per week. The conversation swings from shipping delays and crop failures to scandalous news about a rival merchant who's had his entire stock of cheese impounded for public safety reasons. You stroll to your favorite coffee house where fortunes are made, lost, and gossiped about in equal measure. Here, powerful men trade rumors with even more powerful women, and the air is thick with tobacco smoke, ambition, and someone loudly arguing about the price of nutmeg. The coffee house is the beating heart of Amsterdam's social and financial machinery. Forget stuffy town halls and private parlors. If you want to know what's happening in the city and what might happen tomorrow, this is the place. Stepping inside, you're immediately hit by the scent of strong coffee, even stronger opinions, and at least 3 varieties of pipe tobacco, none of which your doctor would recommend inhaling before breakfast. The room is packed. Merchants with ink-stained fingers, gentlemen in elaborately tied cravats, widows with eyes sharper than a fencing foil, and a scattering of philosophers who always seem to have nowhere else to be. You claim your usual table, close enough to the stove for warmth, but not so close you get accused of monopolizing the best seat. A servant brings you a porcelain cup and a pot of Amsterdam's famous black brew. You sip, burning your tongue, but you don't complain. Complaining is reserved for people who can't afford sugar. The buzz of conversation rises and falls around you, punctuated by the clink of coins and the occasional outburst as someone's bet on pepper futures turns suddenly tragic. Here, social status isn't determined just by wealth, but by who you know and what you know, preferably before anyone else. Information is the city's unofficial currency. Did the East India Company lose a ship off the coast of Ceylon? Is a certain alderman rumored to have invested in a wildly speculative cocoa scheme? Is someone's second cousin twice removed, planning to elope with a bookbinder's apprentice? If you want the inside scoop, this is where you fish for it, usually by pretending not to listen, while secretly listening harder than a professional eavesdropper. Politics and business blend seamlessly with scandal and theater. You overhear whispered arguments about city taxes, theatrical debates about the mayor's wig, and grandstanding monologues about trade policy that would make Cicero roll his eyes. Across the room, someone is loudly recounting last night's dinner party. Who sat next to whom, who got drunk on spiced wine, and who left with their dignity only slightly dented. It's a world where reputations are built, destroyed, and rebuilt again, all before the morning pastries run out. Every conversation comes with a side of negotiation. If you want to arrange a marriage, buy a warehouse, or sneak your way on the guest list for the governor's next ball, the coffee house is your best bet. Deals are struck over steamy mugs, investments proposed and rejected, and partnerships sealed with nothing more than a handshake and a shared plate of candied ginger. If you're lucky, you leave with a promising new business partner. If you're unlucky, you leave with a new enemy who's better at chess and worse at forgiveness than you. You listen politely while an uncle laments about the time I lost the family fortune on a single bulb. Tulomania may be over, but the trauma is generational. No one trusts a gardener, and every dinner party ends with a debate about whether tulips are a flower or a financial crime. You listen politely while an uncle laments about the time I lost the family fortune on a single bulb. Tulomania may be over, but the trauma is generational. No one trusts a gardener, and every dinner party ends with a debate about whether tulips are a flower or a financial crime. It's been decades since the bubble burst, but in Amsterdam, the scars still run deep. If you've never watched grown men debate the moral value of a flower, just attend a well-lubricated gathering on the Her. The subject always arrives after dessert. Someone mentions the word investment, and suddenly every eye narrows, every fork slows, and every aging merchant has a tulip story that doubles as a cautionary tale. Your own family is not immune. Your great-aunt still refuses to plant anything with petals. The family dog is named Ruin. At holidays, someone inevitably brings up the Van Houtens, who were once so wealthy they paid a painter just to capture the essence of their prized tulip. Now, rumor has it, they rent out their canal house to a cheesemonger and spend their evenings explaining the difference between speculation and poor life choices. The origin story is always the same. It started with a simple, beautiful flower, something new, rare, and exotic. Tulips arrived in Amsterdam from the Ottoman Empire, and for a while, only the richest collectors had them. Soon, owning a tulip wasn't just a hobby. It was a badge of honor, a declaration that you were cultured, connected, and maybe just a little bit unhinged. Rare bulbs fetched higher prices than city houses. Poets swooned, artists painted, merchants mortgaged. Rationality went on vacation. By the height of the mania, the trading floors and back alleys of Amsterdam were gripped with floral fever. The language of business changed overnight. Bulb contracts were exchanged with handshakes, scribbled on napkins, and often resold 5 times before anyone remembered to check if an actual bulb existed. Some people made a fortune. Others, like your uncle, made history by losing one. And then one day, the wind changed. No one wanted to buy at the new higher price. The panic was immediate and universal. Fortunes evaporated, sometimes in the time it takes to serve a round of coffee. Bankers lost their shirts. Gardeners changed their names. By the end, the only thing left growing in Amsterdam was a forest of IUs and family feuds. If you want to spot the families who lost big, just look for the houses with suspiciously empty flower beds and unusually nervous-looking accountants. Now, in the early 1700s, Amsterdam has learned its lesson, sort of. People are still willing to speculate, but there's always a faint tulip-shaped cloud hanging over the city's ambitions. If you suggest a new investment, someone will ask if it can be eaten, sat on, or at least pawned in an emergency. It's not another tulip, is it? Is both a joke and a threat. Yet the flower itself remains strangely beloved. Markets are still filled with tulip sellers, each one promising that these bulbs at least are guaranteed not to bankrupt your grandchildren. Gardeners hawk their wares with the humility of gamblers on parole. Even your own mother maintains a tiny plot of tulips in the back garden. But every spring she swears it's for the color, not the speculation. No one believes her. The wealthy home is a museum of plunder and questionable taste. Delft tiles compete with Japanese lacquer boxes, and you're never more than 6 feet from something either hideous, precious, or both. The only rule, if it looks expensive, put it in the window. The wealthy home is a museum of plunder and questionable taste. Delft tiles compete with Japanese lacquer boxes, and you're never more than 6 feet from something either hideous, precious, or both. The only rule, if it looks expensive, put it in the window. Every room in your canal house is a battleground for bragging rights, and the opening salvo is always visual. Guests step over the threshold and are immediately assaulted by the gleam of blue and white Delftware, artfully arranged on every available surface. Is that a vase or an urn, a tea caddy or an instrument of psychological warfare? No one knows. It doesn't matter. The point is that you have more of them than your neighbor, and that yours are slightly taller, wider, or otherwise more likely to inspire envy or a backhanded compliment. But you can't just stop at Dutch porcelain. That would be parochial. You need to show that your wealth is global, your taste cosmopolitan, and your shipping contacts numerous enough to get you an actual pineapple before it's mush. Enter the parade of loot. Japanese lacquer boxes, Chinese silks, Persian carpets, Indonesian spices, and whatever the latest returning ship managed not to drop into the sea. Each item gets pride of place, even if it clashes violently with the wallpaper or the family's collective sense of decency. Your mantelpiece becomes a diplomatic summit, Delft flanked by Ming. The coffee table groans under the weight of mother-of-pearl snuff boxes and a Nautilus shell cup that you're pretty sure is supposed to be ornamental, but once held punch at a disastrous dinner party. Cabinets bulge with silver filigree from Goa, while Turkish lamps glow quietly, daring the fire brigade to pay a visit. There's a tapestry on the wall depicting either a biblical scene or possibly a riot in the cheese market. Interpretation depends on the guest's level of education and the hour of the night. This home decor arms race is only partially about aesthetics. Mostly it's about sending a message to anyone lucky enough to be invited over for gin and gossip. That message: yes, my ancestor did risk death by malaria for that box, and I'm still not letting you touch it. If you really want to impress, you hang a Dutch painting over every available fireplace. Preferably something that looks somber, expensive, and morally improving, but not too many landscapes. You don't want guests to think you're sentimental about mud. Of course, all of this stuff requires constant care, which means a small army of dusting, polishing, and muttering servants. There are whispered rumors that the best homes employ a Delft whisperer, an elderly maid who knows how to dust porcelain so delicately it counts as art restoration. You wouldn't dare trust just anyone with a Japanese lacquer. Not after what happened to the neighbor's tragic plate incident of '94. Arguments erupt, not just about what goes where, but about the deeper meaning behind each piece. Does a Chinese vase really go with a Venetian mirror? Should the pineapple be displayed until it collapses in on itself, or quietly eaten in the kitchen? Far from judgmental eyes. When in doubt, the answer is simple. Put it in the window and let the city talk. Your neighbors whisper about the East India Company, but you know better. Everybody who's anybody has a finger in some international pie, spices, silk, and the odd shipment of unlicensed cocoa beans. All in a day's work for Amsterdam's richest. This is a city where fortunes are built and lost before breakfast, and where morality has to hustle to keep up with profit margins. From your canal house window, you watch the comings and goings of ships flying more flags than a diplomat's summer wardrobe. Every ship in the harbor is a floating safe deposit box packed with goods that might or might not have been obtained according to the rules. In Amsterdam, the real rule is simple. If it fits in a crate, it can be sold. If it can be sold, it can be taxed, gossiped about, or quietly lost on the docks and show up in your cousin's kitchen by nightfall. The VOC, the Dutch East India Company, is both legend and cautionary tale. Officially, they're the pride of the Republic, making even the most modest merchant feel like a participant in global destiny. Unofficially, everyone knows someone who's gotten fabulously wealthy, moving a shipment or two that never appear in the logbooks. You attend shareholder meetings not because you care about quarterly returns, but because that's where the real business happens. Quiet backroom deals, coded handshakes, and the occasional gift of an anonymous chest of nutmeg that just needs a home. The company itself is a marvel of bureaucracy, ambition, and casual villain. Its reach extends from the Indonesian archipelago to the sugar islands of the Caribbean. And if there's a profit to be made, the VOCC is already there, sometimes ahead of the law, often ahead of their own paperwork. You know, several neighbors who owe their entire lifestyle to a lucky investment in cinnamon or a well-timed tip about a shipment of surplus tea. Even the city's most pious churchgoers look the other way when the profits roll in. After all, who could resist a good spice market? Especially if it means their pew cushion is a bit softer on Sunday. If you have a conscience, it's best to keep it in your other jacket. The stories are everywhere. Fortunes made overnight, rival families ruined by one bad monsoon, and rumors of planters and traders vanishing in distant ports under unclear circumstances. You host parties where guests trade stories of pirates, typhoons, and corrupt colonial officials. Each one more outrageous than the last. Each one delivered with a knowing wink and a careful lack of specifics. No one asks too many questions, and nobody mentions the labor behind those spices. The less you know, the better you sleep. Of course, there are ways to make your money look cleaner. Philanthropy is in vogue. Every respectable merchant sponsors a hospital wing or an orphanage, or if you're feeling truly extravagant, a canal cleanup. Just don't ask what's actually floating in there. Art collections grow fat on the proceeds of questionable trade, and the city's finest houses fill up with paintings of tulips and pious saints. A smokescreen for fortunes built on peppercorns and silk. The competition is fierce, the stakes are high, and the line between cleverness and criminality gets blurrier by the day. If you're not hedging your bets, you're probably losing them. You keep one eye on your ships and the other on your rivals. Never forget, today's trading partner is tomorrow's competitor and possibly the reason you can't find cinnamon at the market this week. Double dealing is practically a civic duty, and everyone knows that a bribe, if well-timed, is just another form of negotiation. As for you, you play the game because not playing is the fastest route to irrelevance. When your neighbors whisper about your latest import, you just smile, pour them a little more Madeira, and ask if they'd like to invest in a promising new venture involving Turkish carpets and rebranded clothes. You've learned that in Amsterdam, the secret to success isn't honesty. It's plausible deniability, a good lawyer, and a willingness to toast to profits. No matter where the spices were picked, by midday, your ships are back out on the water, and your ledgers are creative. You know better than to feel guilty. If you don't make a fortune on spices, silk, and cocoa, someone else will, and probably already has. In this city, ethics are negotiable, but money is forever. So, you raise your glass to the world, to trade, to questionable deals, and to the eternal promise of another ship coming in with the tide. Lunch arrives, and so does the inevitable herring. You eye a platter of pickled fish, rye bread, and enough cheese to start your own nation. If you're lucky, a guest might bring something exotic like flamingo tongue, just to show off. This is no casual midday meal. In 1700s Amsterdam, lunch is both a performance and a battlefield. The dining room glows in the watery Dutch sunlight. The long oak table set with fine putter and painted porcelain. Every fork and knife gleaming as if to say, yes, I can afford cutlery that isn't made from bone. You settle in, try to look unimpressed by the abundance. Even as your stomach reminds you that breakfast was several centuries ago, first come the servants parading in like a well-choreographed dance troupe. One balances a tray of warm bread rolls, rye of course because you're not a barbarian, and another ladles out thick mustard, sharp enough to clear your sinuses and your moral compass at the same time. A picture of small beer is poured with practiced precision. Water, as usual, is viewed with deep suspicion, but beer is for everyone, even the children, after all. It's the 1700s, and hydration is best left to the professionals. Then it's time for the fish. Herring, smoked eel, sometimes dry cod. If it swims and can survive a week in a barrel, it's fair game. You're expected to eat it with grace, even as the aroma makes your eyes water and your less adventurous friends are the nearest window. Pickled onions appear as a palate cleanser or possibly as a test of courage. If you're feeling especially ambitious, you attempt the double herring flip, a local trick involving one herring, two fingers, and a sincere hope nobody is watching too closely. But the real centerpiece is always the cheese. Wheels of Gouda, wedges of Edam, crumbly bits of aged Leyden, enough to make you wonder if the Dutch are quietly attempting to corner the market on cholesterol. Each variety is introduced with a little backstory by the steward, who takes his job more seriously than some generals take warfare. If you nod approvingly at the right moment, you might even get an extra slice of the special reserve aged in a cellar guarded by a particularly aggressive goose. On the side, the bread, dense, dark, and robust. The kind of loaf you could use as a defensive weapon in a tight spot. You smear it with butter and marvel at how the Dutch managed to turn something so simple into an edible brick. There are occasional foray into luxury, imported figs, candied orange peel, and once at a particularly daring luncheon, a dish of Indian rice, which you later learn is just barley with a fancy name. Then, just when you think you've tasted everything the North Sea has to offer, a guest produces the pièce de resistance, something truly exotic. Today it's flamingo tongue, delicately roasted and displayed with as much ceremony as a royal decree. You nod politely, all the while wondering if anyone will notice if you discreetly slip your portion to the family cat. The guest beams, certain they've set a new standard in ostentation. You vow privately to track down something even more outrageous before your next party. Ostrich eggs, perhaps, or the legendary spiced armadillo rumored to have been served at the governor's table. Lunch is not just about food. It's a social contest where conversation is every bit as important as the menu. Topics swirl. The latest news from Bavia. Rumors of new taxes. Scandalous stories about who fell into the canal after last night's ball. Every remark is a carefully placed gambit. Every compliment laced with subtext. Such tenderial might really mean I saw your bookkeeper in the pawn shop. The stakes are high and every guest is a potential ally or rival. You finish the meal with a slice of crumb cake and a little glass of Geneva, the local gin. The flavors linger, salty, sharp, a little sweet, and very, very Dutch. As the plates are cleared, you lean back, sated, but also quietly plotting your next culinary coup. In Amsterdam, even lunch is a contest you can't afford to lose. Work, that's what accountants and lawyers are for. You spend your afternoon watching other people argue about money, then sign whatever they give you. If something goes wrong, you blame the French. This, in essence, is the true privilege of 18th century Amsterdam wealth. You don't do work, you delegate it, ideally to people who look suitably anxious in wigs. Your daily routine after lunch consists of gliding into your study, glancing at a mountain of paperwork, and immediately summoning your accountant who appears like a summoned spirit clutching a ledger and an expression of mild existential dread. He's here to discuss double-entry bookkeeping, but you're more interested in whether you can expense your new collection of Mings as essential office equipment. Lawyers are even better. You keep at least 2 on retainer at all times, mostly for the thrill of never actually reading a contract yourself. Whenever a new legal problem arises, say a merchant from Bruges claims your cargo of nutmeg was short by 3 sacks, or a neighbor accuses you of letting your canal dog swim unsupervised, you simply gesture toward the nearest lawyer and return to your true calling. Sitting in a sunbeam, sipping Madeira, and offering unsolicited advice to your children. Delegation is more than just a way to avoid labor. In Amsterdam, it's an art form honed by generations of rich people determined never to get their hands dirty, unless, of course, it's with imported face powder or the occasional ceremonial handshake. Each role in your personal bureaucracy is perfectly calibrated. Your steward oversees the household staff, ensuring the silver is polished, the linens are laundered, and no one dares to use the good Delftware for anything less than a royal visit. Your secretary answers letters, drafts polite refusals, and keeps track of invitations so you never accidentally attend the same party as your rivals. You've also mastered the fine art of sitting in on meetings. This means sitting at the head of a table surrounded by clerks, brokers, and various relatives who may or may not be there for the free cheese while they debate the finer points of warehouse insurance or canal maintenance fees. You nod sagely, interject a thoughtful and sign wherever your advisor quietly points. If someone asks your opinion, you say, "Let's be prudent," which is code for, do whatever you want, but don't blame me if it goes wrong. On the rare occasion something does go wrong, a shipment lost to pirates, a minor legal scandal, or the accidental import of 3 dozen crates of cabbages instead of cashmere, you've got a ready-made scapegoat, the French. It's a time-honored tradition, and nobody questions it. Blame the French covers everything from business losses to a sudden shortage of decent Bordeaux at last night's dinner. If you're really in a bind, blame the English too. They're always up to something. Of course, this system isn't flawless. There's always the lurking threat of one underpaid accountant going rogue and skimming off the top, or a disgruntled steward spreading rumors about your secret fondness for pineapple wallpaper. To combat this, you keep a careful rotation. No one gets too comfortable, and everyone gets just enough responsibility to be grateful, but not enough to stage a coup. You've heard stories of families ruined by too much trust in a single advisor in your house. Paranoia is just another word for prudent management. But don't be fooled into thinking you're lazy. Delegation requires constant vigilance, mostly of other people's work. There's an art to the perfect passive-aggressive note, a science to timing your afternoon inspections just as the staff are about to serve tea, and a delicate social dance in rewarding loyalty while never letting anyone forget who actually owns the chandeliers. Sometimes you even write memos just to give the illusion of activity. Your favorite. See to it. In the end, your greatest achievement is the seamless illusion of effort. From the outside, it looks like you're running an empire. From the inside, you're running a very successful game of hot potato. With responsibility as the potato and plausible deniability as your winning hand, you retire to your library at dusk. Content in the knowledge that while everyone else is busy working, you've perfected the highest calling of the Dutch elite. Never doing anything yourself unless it involves cheese, gene, or an elaborate signature on a piece of paper you didn't write. Traveling anywhere means navigating a sea of boats, horses, and people who clearly have no concept of right-of-way. You arrive fashionably late to everything because you spent 20 minutes trapped behind a barge full of turnips. Welcome to the daily reality of 1700s Amsterdam, a city where half the streets are water and the other half are so narrow you could shake hands with your neighbor through your front window. As one of the city's well-heeled elite, you have options. You could call for your personal carriage, slide into a gondola like Sloop, or on a particularly daring day, actually walk somewhere, a move so shocking it could spark 3 new rumors and a minor scandal before lunch. But let's be honest, walking is for servants and philosophers. You prefer to glide along the canals ensconced in a polished wooden boat complete with plush velvet cushions, a liver-eyed oarsman, and a faint lingering hope that nobody will spot you struggling to disembark. Boating around town is both a status symbol and a tactical maneuver. The wider the boat, the more money you're showing off. The more ornate the paintwork and the shinier the brass fittings, the higher the likelihood that someone at the coffee house will compliment your taste. Or more likely, quietly note that you've overcompensated for your disappointing cheese board at last month's dinner party. Of course, with every merchant, matron, and mid-level aristocrat wanting to make their presence known, the canals are frankly chaos. Picture a highway at rush hour, but instead of cars, you have slow-moving barges produce laden skiffs, gossiping neighbors and rowboats, a smattering of drunken students, and one very confused swan that seems to think it owns the place. The soundtrack is hooves on the tow paths, the shouts of boatmen, starboard port. No, your other port too, and the ever-present slap of water against hull. Being late is a way of life. Traffic on the canal is the universal excuse for everything from tardiness to missed business deals to why you couldn't possibly have attended that poetry reading your cousin hosted. The city council has tried to regulate the mess, but enforcing rules among the floating gentry is a little like herring ducks. There's an unspoken hierarchy to canal travel, too. Large cargo barges get priority, but only if their owners can outshout the competition. Smaller pleasure crafts zip between them, their owners glaring at anyone who dares splash their Sunday best. With so much as a single drop of canal water, occasionally your journey takes you over one of the city's famous humpback bridges. Your Osmond ducks expertly. You do your best not to tip over, and somewhere a child leans over the rail to make faces at you. If you're in a hurry, say the mayor's banquet started half an hour ago, and you still haven't decided whether to wear the blue sash or the red, you might try to cut through a side canal only to find yourself gridlocked by a flotilla of market boats. There's nothing quite as humbling as sitting in your gleaming pleasure sloop, forced to make awkward small talk with a fishmonger whose catch is very much alive and making its opinion known. Sometimes, if you're feeling brave, you opt for your carriage. This means squeezing down cobbled streets, dodging pedestrians, dogs, and the occasional runaway pig. You arrive at your destination with your nerves in tatters and your wig skew, but at least you've avoided the turnip barge blockade. Just don't expect your horses to be thrilled. They spend most of their day pretending not to be afraid of swans. Through it all, you maintain the air of a person above such inconveniences. When you finally arrive, you offer a serene smile and a casual, "Oh, traffic was dreadful." Everyone nods in sympathy, while secretly congratulating themselves for arriving even later. In Amsterdam, being fashionably late is not only accepted, it's practically mandatory. In the end, every journey is a spectacle, a floating parade of wealth, wit, and mild exasperation. The canals may be crowded, the streets confusing, but that's all part of the city's charm. After all, what's the point of being rich in Amsterdam if you can't make an entrance? Preferably just as dessert is being served. So, you can blame the turnips one last time. You spend your evenings hopping from candlelit balls to endless dinners, each one an elaborate audition for more power, influence, or at least a better marriage for your least favorite child. In 1700s Amsterdam, the social calendar is a relentless beast. Your day may begin in silk pajamas, but it always ends in formal wear, weighed down by jewels, expectation, and enough perfume to be considered a minor fire hazard. There's no such thing as a quiet night at home for the wealthy. Invitations pile up like overdue bills, each one promising intimate conversation and modest entertainment, which in practice means 3 orchestras, 2 courses of wild game, and the very real risk of waltzing straight into your most bitter rival. You prepare for the evening with military precision. Your valet and maid fuss with your appearance, smoothing wrinkles and artfully disguising any hint of fatigue or boredom. Your spouse, ch, checks the seating charts, making sure you're never stuck between a notorious bore and that one uncle who brings up tulip mania after his 3rd glass of Geneva. Before you leave, you brace yourself with a fortifying cup of chocolate or a little glass of cherry, whichever is closer at hand. The first stop might be a neighbor's dinner party, where you're ushered into a dining room glittering with polished silver, roaring with laughter, and quietly simmering with ambition. You're expected to arrive fashionably late, sweep in with just the right amount of confidence, and look ever so slightly unimpressed by the host's centerpiece, an elaborate arrangement of imported fruits and flowers. While servants top up your wine, you navigate a conversation minefield. Polite small talk with the mayor's wife, whispered gossip with a business rival, and the occasional philosophical debate with someone's very earnest cousin who read half a book once. By the second course, the real games begin. You gently probe for news of impending marriages, business ventures, or legal disputes, all while maintaining an expression of bland interest. Every toast is an opportunity to raise your status. Every compliment is a veiled challenge. Your herring is delightful might really mean, I see you finally hired a proper chef. The most seasoned social climbers can deliver a cutting remark with the sweetness of a compliment and leave their opponent reeling. After dinner, the party migrates to the ballroom. Here, amid flickering candles and the music of a slightly off-key quartet, the scheming ramps up. Daughters and sons are paraded about, each one groomed to catch a titled spouse or a wealthy merchant. Mothers plot, fathers negotiate, and the young try to look agreeable enough to marry, but not so desperate that they end up shipped off to Bavia. If you're fortunate, you'll dance with someone important, exchange a few words that could lead to a profitable partnership, and avoid stepping on anyone's shoes, especially the mayor's, who never forget to slight. The pressure is relentless. You must laugh at the right jokes, praise the right paintings, and if necessary, fake admiration for an amateur poet's sonnet about dyes. Any sign of weakness, an outdated dress, a limp handshake, or a rumor about your last stock market disaster could demote you from inner circle to social Siberia overnight. The stakes are high, and everyone knows it. There are other amusements, of course. Card tables for the gamblers, music rooms for the sensitive, gardens for midnight strolls, and whispered conversations. You might find yourself plotting a business venture in a corner, arranging a discreet loan, or negotiating the finer points of a marriage contract with someone who always seems to know a little too much about your finances. As the night draws on, you watch alliances form and dissolve in real time. One moment you're best friends with a shipping magnate. The next you're arch-enemies after a heated argument about who sat too close to the burgomaster. By the time the last guest has left and the carriages are summoned, you're exhausted but exhilarated. Your head spinning with the evening's victories, defeats, and scandalous tidbits. Finally, you collapse into bed, already planning tomorrow's charm offensive. In Amsterdam, the ball never truly ends. Social climbing is an Olympic sport with no finish line, and every dinner party is another step up, sideways, or if you're not careful, straight into the canal. Forget Gilders. Information is what really moves Amsterdam. News spreads faster than the plague, and nothing ruins a reputation faster than a rumor started by your own mother-in-law. In a city powered by trade, it's easy to think money is everything. But among the canal houses and coffee shops, the real fortunes rise and fall on whispers. You can almost feel the flow of gossip bubbling through dinner parties, swirling around the church steps, drifting along the canal with the morning mist. A scandal about someone's trading losses might be on the lips of every fisher by noon. By evening, it's grown arms, legs, and at least one secret love child. Gossip is Amsterdam's great social leveler. The richest merchant, the most pious matron, even that mysterious newcomer with suspiciously shiny boots. No one is immune. If your maid hears something, your cook knows it by lunchtime, and your neighbor's parrot is repeating it by sunset. Whole reputations are built or destroyed over little more than a glance, a raised eyebrow, or a servant who was too quick with a bucket outside the wrong door. What's astonishing is the speed. No sooner has someone tripped over a loose cobblestone, or left a party a shade too early, then theories multiply. Did you hear the Van Leuvens were snubbed at last week's ball? Tragic. That the mayor's nephew lost a fortune in Pepper Futures. Predictable. That the new art dealer is secretly Polish royalty. Doubtful. But why not? Every scrap of news is dissected, exaggerated, and often repurposed to suit the teller's needs. You naturally try to keep your own name out of circulation. But it's a losing battle. Did you host 3 dinners this month instead of 2? Scandalous. Did your youngest child forget their Latin at breakfast? A sure sign your family is slipping. Did your wife's cousin's hairdresser get a breakfast new dress? Clearly, she's been paid in stolen diamonds. There's no detail too small to escape scrutiny. Even your cheese purchases are subject to speculation. Only 2 wheels this week. Are times that hard? Gossip isn't all cruelty and Chardin. It's also a social glue. It gives people something to talk about that isn't the weather or the price of firewood. It smooths awkward conversations, offers opportunities for subtle boasts, and allows old friends to bond over mutual disdain for a third party's wallpaper. In fact, some of the city's closest friendships are forged in the crucible of shared secrets and Snyder sides. Still, there are rules. You can spread a rumor, but never admit to starting it. You can laugh at a scandal as long as you look shocked first. And above all, you must never ever let on how much you enjoy it when your rivals are caught in the latest web of intrigue. Because tomorrow it could be you. All it takes is a misplaced letter, a badly timed yawn at church, or a neighbor with a grudge, and a loud voice at the market. In this world, controlling gossip is an art form. You seed a little good news here, a tiny scandal there. If you're clever, you can use it to distract from your own shortcomings. Did you hear about the merchant's son who dyed his wig green? Is a handy way to redirect attention when your own accounts are looking a bit thin. As night falls and you extinguish the candles, you know the city's grapevine never sleeps. Tomorrow there'll be something new to whisper about. So you tuck yourself in, pray your secrets are safe for another day, and promise yourself that if you hear anything especially delicious at breakfast, you'll only tell your very best friend or maybe just one neighbor. Or let's be honest, whoever will listen while you plot your next big investment. Your spouse manages the household, outmaneuvers, rivals, and possibly dabbles in secret trading on the side. She's a social network in pearls and stays in the bustling world of 1700s Amsterdam. Your wife is the engine that keeps your canal mansion from collapsing into a pile of unpaid bills, rumpled linens, and domestic chaos. Forget the tired cliché of the idle lady embroidering by the window. The merchant's wife is a multitasking marvel running the show with a smile that's equal parts charm and cunning. As you negotiate the price of pepper in the coffee house, she's negotiating everything else: supplies, servants, marriages, and most critically, reputations. The day starts before yours as she oversees the kitchen staff, ensures the bread is properly baked, not too dark, not too pale, and dispatches the scullery maids like a general deploying troops. She keeps meticulous household accounts, knowing to the guilder how much cheese was consumed last week, and which footman is suspiciously careless with the Delftware. In a city obsessed with both appearances and thrift, her budget is both sword and shield. Managing the household is only part of her empire. Your wife's real power comes in her ability to navigate the shifting sands of Amsterdam society. She maintains a delicate network of alliances and rivalries, always aware of who's hosting which dinner, whose marriage is teetering, and which neighbor is rumored to be importing questionable lace from France. Her letters are a study in diplomatic subtlety, packed with carefully chosen words and an arsenal of veiled suggestions. No one is better at a polite threat disguised as an invitation tea. She's also the family's PR manager, tirelessly burnishing your reputation. When gossip threatens, she responds with a perfectly timed compliment or a strategically planned luncheon that reminds everyone just how tasteful and generous your family can be. If a rival spreads a nasty rumor, your wife will counter with 3 stories of your latest charitable work, told with such grace that even your harshest critic finds themselves nodding in admiration. If anyone in the city can turn scandal into sympathy, it's her. Yet beneath the silks and pearls, there's an entrepreneur's spirit. Women in Amsterdam are not strangers to commerce. Some manage their own money, invest in trading ventures, or even act as silent partners in businesses that the men barely suspect. Your wife might have a share in the tulip market, a small investment in a spice shipment, or her own arrangement with a local apothecary for rare French soaps strictly under the table. Of course, if you wonder why your ledgers sometimes don't add up, check for a line item labeled miscellaneous pins. It's code for profitable secrets. She also manages the next generation matchmaking with the precision of a chess grandmaster. Daughters are primed for the best possible marriages, sons schooled in manners, and younger children bribed with candied nuts to keep quiet during crucial meetings. Her eye for opportunity is unerring. A well-timed compliment, a seat at the right supper, a knowing nod in church. These tiny moves accumulate, building the family's fortune, not just in guilders, but in influence. Behind closed doors, she's your closest advisor, often the voice of reason when your business risks grow a little too bold or your latest scheme edges toward disaster. You be wise to listen. After all, the canal houses of Amsterdam are littered with the ghosts of men who ignored their wives' warnings and found themselves both bankrupt and the subject of especially vicious gossip. So, while you may sign the contracts and collect the credit, remember, without the merchant's wife, her spreadsheets, her social radar, her small army of loyal servants, and her secret stash of trading receipts, you're just another overconfident merchant floating down the canal. She's the real power in the house, and she knows it. Your children are tutored in French fencing and the fine art of not spilling gravy on silk. Their main hobbies practicing signature flourishes and being disappointed in your parenting in the grand canal houses of Amsterdam. Childhood is a full-time job, especially when you're rich. The mornings begin with the distant sound of tutors arguing in multiple languages. Is it Tuesday? Then it's violin at dawn, followed by Latin verbs and enough arithmetic to make anyone wish for a simpler life. Preferably one where you can just inherit the family fortune and call it a day. Education is the ultimate status symbol. Forget street games and carefree mud pies. Here, every lesson is designed to mold your offspring into the sort of adult who can impress a room with a clever turn of phrase, or at minimum not embarrass the family name at the mayor's next ball. There's a rotating cast of tutors. Monsieur Brossard for French, Herr Schmidt for music, and Madame Dear for manners, because please sounds much more convincing when you say it with the right posture and a look of mild disdain. The afternoons are reserved for physical pursuits. Fencing lessons, of course, are non-negotiable. The goal is to look dangerous without ever actually being in danger. If someone accidentally gets poked, it's chalked up to character building and quickly covered with a lace cuff. The garden becomes an obstacle course, running drills and wooden clogs for resilience, practicing courtly bows and the occasional race to see who can recite Virgil the fastest while balancing a tray of delicate teacups. But all this polish has a price. The children develop a flair for critique, usually directed squarely at their parents. Your daughter, barely 12, delivers sharp, whispered appraisals of the guests' outfits, while your son perfects his eye roll each time you mention the glories of your own youth, which, to be fair, involve fewer lessons and a lot more cheese. There's always one who insists they were born for greater things, by which they mean not having to practice the harpsichord every morning. Socializing is an Olympic event. Every play date is a covert lesson in politics, alliances, and the art of accidentally impressing the right family. If a rival's child happens to spill juice on your daughter's new silk, it's noted and filed away for future dinner party gossip. The games are less about fun and more about subtle peacocking. Who's read the most? Who can quote Cicero? Who owns the rarest imported marble toy from Venice? Of course, the true rite of passage is the signature flourish armed with oversized quills. Your children spend hours copying the ornate scripts of the city's greatest merchants. There's no such thing as a quick signature. Each letter must swoop and curl, as if the ink itself is performing acrobatics. It's all about leaving a mark that screams, "My family has been here since before you could afford windows." Underneath it all, though, is a weirdly competitive tenderness. Siblings squabble. Yes, but they close ranks if anyone outside the family dares question their lineage or their ability to quote Oid before dessert. At family meals, their Latin outpaces their table manners, and their snarky wit can only be rivaled by their mothers. You suspect half their education is really just training for a life of clever comebacks. Still, it's hard not to feel a little pride when you watch them. Haughty, eloquent, and always just a touch too aware of their own importance. You know that behind all the bluster, the lessons will serve them well. The world of Amsterdam's elite is brutal, and survival depends as much on confidence as it does on coin. At least that's what you tell yourself as you sign another check for fencing lessons and remind your youngest for the 5th time this week that you're not paying for another ruined pair of silk stockings. In the end, raising rich kids in Amsterdam is a blend of ambition, anxiety, and the faint hope they'll thank you someday, preferably in flawless French. Until then, you settle for eye rolls and perfect penmanship and pray no one spills gravy at the governor's table. Your biggest fear that your neighbor's house is one window taller than yours. Every day is a battle of renovations, garden parties, and decorative gables. This is Amsterdam in the Golden Age, and conspicuous consumption is less a vice and more a civic duty. The city's canals may be calm, but just behind those lace-curtained windows, an arms race of status is underway. One where the ammunition is bricks, tulips, and the occasional marble statue shipped all the way from Italy just to prove a point. You wake each morning with a quick glance across the water, scanning for any sign that the Van Loons have added another fountain, widened their stoop, or heaven forbid, repainted their shutters in a shade even pricier than your own. Of course, it's never enough to simply keep pace. No, you must outshine, outspend, and outweat. This is why you find yourself consulting with architects about adding just a little more to the facade. Perhaps a decorative gable featuring cherubs or a window frame carved with your family crest. If you're feeling particularly bold, you might commission a rooftop weather vane in the shape of a windmill. It's less about direction and more about reminding the neighbors that your fortunes are blowing in the right one. Inside, the home is in a state of constant gentle upheaval. Painters touch up walls that barely look lived in. Seamstresses work overtime to update the curtains for every season. And somewhere in the garden, the landscaper is digging another pond. All of this naturally is visible from the street. After all, what's the point of installing a marble statue of Neptune, if not to give the local gossip something new to mention at the coffee house? Then there are the garden parties, the true battleground of social supremacy. You've barely finished recovering from your own modest luncheon before you're invited to the Van Lawn's casual gathering, which features a live harpsichordist, a swan-shaped ice sculpture, and more imported figs than could possibly be consumed by 100 guests. The unspoken competition is in full swing. Whose garden boasts the rarest tulip? Who managed to acquire the first pineapple of the season? Whose cheese selection nearly caused a diplomatic incident? Alliances are forged and broken with every cup of tea. If you catch your neighbor admiring your new rose arbor, you make a mental note to have something even more impressive installed before autumn. If their children are learning Italian, yours are immediately enrolled in lessons with a tutor flown in from Florence for maximum effect. Even pets become props in the pageantry. Nothing says success like a parrot who speaks 3 languages and ignores everyone but the mayor's wife. At times, the rivalry borders on the ridiculous. One year, a heated dispute erupts over the correct shade of blue for canal house shutters. The city council is called in, and for weeks, the neighborhood is divided along chromatic lines. Meanwhile, rumors swirl that someone is planning a secret renovation to add yet another window to their attic, pushing the local building codes and everyone's patience to the limit. But beneath this surface competition, there's a strange sense of camaraderie. After all, who else truly understands the agony of discovering your neighbor's footman has a fancier livery? Who but a fellow status-obsessed Amsterdammer can sympathize when your delivery of rare lees is upstaged by a rival's unexpected acquisition of a peacock? It's rivalry, yes, but it's also the city's favorite sport. A never-ending round of can you top this? At the end of the day, you stare at your house from across the canal, weighing every window, every statue, every carefully trimmed hedge. Are you winning? Hard to say. The Vanlons are rumored to be planning something big for next spring. But for now, you take comfort in your marble gable, your thriving roses, and your certainty that at least for today, the Joneses are definitely keeping up with you. Theft is a concern, even for the rich. Enter the canal dog, part guard, part alarm system, and entirely unbothered by the finer points of personal property. Amsterdam in the 1700s is a city that thrives on trade. But where there's trade, there's temptation. As long as fortunes are stacked high in canal houses and expensive imports come floating in by barge, someone will try their luck at a 5-finger discount. You may have a house lined with the finest Delftware and a jewelry box heavy enough to strain your wrist, but all of it is only as safe as your defenses, which for most wealthy Amsterdammers means the family canal dog. The canal dog is not a breed so much as a lifestyle. Some are big with paws like dinner plates and barks that echo down the Princeton. Others are wiry, scrappy, and quick to raise the alarm if they catch so much as a whiff of unfamiliar sausage. You give yours a spot by the door, or better yet, a cushion in the parlor window, where he can survey both the canal and the comings and goings of anyone bold enough to linger too long by your mooring post. Servants adore the canal dog because he's loyal and, unlike the house cat, actually cares if strangers enter the home. Thieves, on the other hand, loathe him. There's nothing like the guttural growl of a dog at midnight to turn even the most determined burglar into a model citizen, at least until they round the next corner. But dogs aren't your only line of defense. The city itself is designed to thwart would-be robbers. Your house has doors thick enough to stop a determined cavalry charge, and locks so complicated even the locksmith's apprentice forgets how they work. The canals act as mows. You can't just sneak away with the family silver without negotiating several bridges, a few suspicious gondolers, and possibly a mother-in-law with insomnia. Still, the criminally inclined are a creative bunch. Over the years, tales abound of burglars who slip in during crowded garden parties, blending in with guests until everyone is just tipsy enough to mistake a stranger for a distant cousin. Some prefer the canal route, rowing up in the dead of night, hoping to slip inside while the family snores. That's when the canal dog earns his keep, raising a racket, chasing shadows, and alerting the entire household with enough noise to summon half the neighborhood. To keep your treasures extra secure, you employ a system of deterrence worthy of a paranoid general. Shutters are barred at dusk, valuables are locked in ornate chests, and servants are issued strict orders to question anyone they don't recognize, even if it's just the neighbor's nephew delivering a pie. At dinner, it's common to regale your guests with stories of the latest thwarted robbery. Everyone nods gravely, clutching their pearls and vowing to hire an even bigger dog. Of course, sometimes the biggest threat is not an outsider, but someone already inside. Rumors swirl of cunning maids making off with a handful of silver spoons, or a footman with a taste for cognac and poor impulse control. This is where the canal dog really shines. No bribe, no matter how juicy, will distract him from his primary duty, defending the hearth, the home, and his personal stash of bones. You might think all this security would make life in Amsterdam feel like living in a fortress. But in reality, the ritual of locking up, patrolling the house, and dropping a final pat on the dog's head is just another part of daily life. A reminder that in a city built on trust, a little healthy paranoia is always in style. So, you tuck your valuables away, double-check the locks, and give your canal dog a scratch behind the ears. As you drift off to sleep, you know that as long as your furry alarm system is on duty, you can rest easy. Even if the neighbors are already plotting to outdo your guard dog with one that wears a bell, a hat, or maybe just a little more attitude. No matter how rich you are, the tax man always finds you. You pay, you grumble, and you occasionally slip someone a coin to make a problem disappear. For all the dazzling canal houses, imported silks, and ostentatious cheese platters, being wealthy in 1700s Amsterdam is a bit like owning a bottomless chest of gold with a dozen eager hands forever reaching in. The city thrives on commerce, but it also thrives on collecting its cut. The system is, let's say, efficient, by which I mean the tax collectors are everywhere, and they have memories like elephants and the social grace of a wet cat. It doesn't matter if your income comes from spice shares or suspiciously successful speculation on pineapples. If you've got it, they'll tax it. If you hide it, they'll tax that too. Your first brush with municipal appreciation might be a friendly knock at the door. Someone in an impressive hat holding a ledger and smiling like a snake oil salesman on market day. There's property tax, canal tax, window tax. Yes, every single pane, shipping fees, inheritance duties, and even a cheese tax if your household gets a bit too enthusiastic at lunch. They claim it's for the good of the city. You suspect it's for the good of their next cheese platter. Of course, every system has its workarounds. Enter the delicate dance of gifts, tips, and favors. If a document goes missing, a ledger suddenly gets misplaced, or an inconvenient shipment of luxury rum finds its way onto the wrong barge. A well-timed bribe can work wonders. You don't call it a bribe, of course. You're simply oiling the wheels of progress. This is Amsterdam, where everyone knows the rules and how to elegantly bend them. Then there are lawsuits. The Dutch have a fondness for legal proceedings that borders on sport. Neighbors will drag each other to court over everything from the encroachment of a rose bush to the color of your newly painted shutters. For the rich, it's a part-time job keeping your lawyers on retainer and your paperwork in order. If you're lucky, you only get sued once a year, usually by a relative who's convinced your attic is technically part of their property. The city's legal archives are filled with cases titled Van Someone versus Van Someone Else, a dispute over 2 canal. These lawsuits aren't always about money. Sometimes it's personal. Someone claimed your carriage splashed mud on their velvet shoes. Someone else is sure your peacock ate their prized tulip bulb. There's no slight too minor for the courts. And if the judges are bored, they're more than happy to draw out proceedings until everyone involved needs a vacation or at least a drink. Still, you play along because the alternative is worse. Ignore a summons, and you might find your best carpet accidentally ruined during a surprise tax inspection. Refuse a bribe and your next shipment of spices is held up, so long the only thing left to sell is mold. It's all a delicate balancing act. Pay enough to keep the wheels turning, but not so much that you become an easy target for every ambitious official in town. At the end of the day, you learn to live with it. Grumbling is expected, and swapping horror stories about taxmen and legal disputes is a key part of every respectable dinner party. You share knowing glances with fellow merchants, each one of you united by the unspoken bond of having survived another year without losing your fortune to fines, fees, or an ill-timed lawsuit. So you keep your accounts as honest as possible. Stash a few coins where only your wife and your most trusted canal dog can find them. And thank your lucky stars that in Amsterdam, there's always another loophole, another lawyer, and if all else fails, another bottle of gin to soothe your troubles away. You're Protestant, your neighbor is Catholic, and across the street is a hidden synagogue. The city prides itself on tolerance, so long as you don't flaunt it, or at least host the best feast days. This is 1700s Amsterdam, a city where commerce, curiosity, and a healthy suspicion of authority have woven together a uniquely tolerant tapestry, at least by the standards of the age. Amsterdam's merchants are proud to announce that here anyone can worship in peace as long as you keep it somewhat discreet, mind the local customs, and avoid upsetting the neighbors. Almost any faith is welcome. That doesn't mean everyone holds hands and sings in the street, of course. It's more like a friendly, low-level competition to see whose holidays have the best cakes. Your canal house itself may have a Bible on display in the sitting room, but your friend down the street sneaks out every Sunday to a secret Catholic chapel hidden above a cheese shop. Across the canal, the local Jewish merchant family hosts Shabbat dinners that are legendary for their food and their guest lists, often featuring Protestants, Catholics, and anyone else who appreciates brisket and a good debate. In public, everyone is careful to follow the rules. In private, there's a fair bit of neighborly borrowing, recipes, gossip, and the occasional clandestine glass of wine during Lent. Religion is officially everyone's own business. But in practice, it's a spectator sport. Protestants build their churches tall and plain with windows that announce their piety to the world. Catholics keep things quiet, worshiping behind closed doors, but compensating with exuberant feast days, parades, and just enough incense to alert the entire block. Jewish families maintain hidden synagogues, simple on the outside, dazzling within. The result is a patchwork of faith, visible at every street corner and market stall, stitched together by mutual suspicion and a shared love of baked goods. This tolerance isn't just a matter of principle. It's good for business. Amsterdam's merchants know that customers come in all creeds, and nothing disrupts trade like a good religious riot. The city fathers learned long ago that peace is more profitable than purity. So long as everyone keeps their head down and their prayers reasonably quiet, Amsterdam is happy to let everyone get rich together. Of course, there's an undercurrent of competition. Who hosts the most memorable holiday? Which faith boasts the grandest processions, the tastiest pastries, or the most dazzling wedding parties? Your neighbor might host a lavish Saints' Day dinner with enough roast goose to feed a small army, only for the local Jewish family to trumpet with a Hanukkah celebration so lively even the Protestants forget their reservations about dancing. The city's Catholic minority might keep their chapel secret, but their nativity plays are the stuff of legend and a perfect excuse to peek into otherwise forbidden rooms. Social maneuvering often takes a religious twist. Families quietly keep track of who attended which services, who donated the most to which orphanage, and whose children sang the loudest at Easter. If you want to impress your neighbors, you don't just invite them over for tea. You subtly let it be known that your holiday cakes came from the best baker in the city. Regardless of his faith, still tolerance has its boundaries. Openly criticizing another's beliefs is a fast track to social exile. And even the city's most liberal merchants know when to keep their opinions to themselves. The trick is to be gracious, generous, and just a little bit competitive. Never miss a neighbor's celebration. Never forget to compliment the host. And always have an extra pastry on hand. At the end of the day, Amsterdam's religious mosaic is both pragmatic and peculiar. A city where people of all backgrounds pray, celebrate, and do business side by side. The real miracle isn't that everyone gets along perfectly, but that in the pursuit of profit and pastries, most are willing to try. When the sun sets, Amsterdam comes alive with concerts, secret club meetings, and the odd fireworks show that may or may not set a neighbor's roof on fire. For the rich of 1700s Amsterdam, nighttime is when the city truly sparkles, sometimes literally. If the fireworks committee gets carried away, the respectable day gives way to something altogether wilder. The canal side houses glow with candlelight and laughter. Music floats across the water, sometimes as a formal concert, sometimes as the drunken efforts of a merchant's son with a borrowed lute. Either way, the result is an air of festivity laced with just enough risk to make you check twice that your insurance is up to date. You might start your evening with a concert. Your friend, the older man, is hosting a small orchestra in his ballroom. By small, he means 24 musicians, 3 singers, and at least one neighbor who will spend the night critiquing the acoustics. The program includes the latest pieces from Paris, a raucous drinking song, and if the crowd is especially lively, a finale involving dueling harpsichords. Between acts, you sip wine, nibble on candied fruit, and try to look like someone who has opinions about tempo. Of course, the music isn't just for show. These gatherings are covert opportunities to build alliances, strike deals, or simply outshine a rival's last swear. The competition is fierce. If the Van Nuens hired a tenor, you hire 2. If they have fireworks, you have a live tableau of Greek myths on your barge, complete with borrowed goats. By midnight, the city's most ambitious party planners are already plotting next week's improvements. For those with a taste for intrigue, the real action happens behind closed doors. Amsterdam's elite flock to private clubs, exclusive societies where the only thing thicker than the tobacco smoke is the air of secrecy. In these dimly lit rooms, massed gatherings are not uncommon. Here, philosophers argue with merchants, artists debate with accountants, and everyone shares the latest scandal in hushed tones. Sometimes the societies are serious, plotting political reforms or sponsoring the next great painter. Other times, it's just an excuse to gamble away half a fortune or swap jokes. Too risque for polite company. Not every night requires an invitation. The streets themselves pulse with energy. Strolling along the canal, you might stumble upon an impromptu dance or a group of students serenading a house made badly, but with admirable enthusiasm. Lanterns hang from boats, casting golden reflections that ripple over the water. Some nights, there's a regatta with every boat in the neighborhood decked out in banners, ribbons, and tipsy passengers determined to row in something resembling a straight line. Of course, no night is complete without a little mischief. The more daring or less supervised among the young elite might sneak onto the rooftops, passing bottles and stories until dawn. Others light fireworks, sending showers of sparks into the sky, and occasionally into an unsuspecting neighbor's garden. If you're lucky, you'll catch the mayor's son trying to fish his hat out of the canal while insisting it was a necessary experiment in buoyancy. Yet, amid all the revelry, there's an undercurrent of calculation. Every compliment paid, every invitation extended, every shared joke is an investment in future advantage. By sunrise, alliances will have shifted, secrets will have changed hands, and at least one family will be plotting to outdo everyone else at the next gathering. As you return home, a little tipsy and more than a little hoarse from singing, you're reminded that for all its order by day, Amsterdam belongs to the night. It's loud, unpredictable, occasionally scandalous, and never ever boring. Just be sure to check the roof for stray fireworks before you go to bed. You collapse into bed surrounded by silk feathers and the faint fear that someone is about to invent the stock market crash. Your dreams are haunted by golden guilder signs and existential questions about cheese. For the wealthy of 1700s Amsterdam, sleep is both a luxury and a battleground. Your bed is a monument to comfort, enormous four-poster draped in the finest imported silks that squeak slightly as you turn over. The mattress is stuffed with goose down, and there are so many pillows that finding your actual head feels like an exercise in navigation. On winter nights, servants heat bed warmers, pans filled with glowing coals and tucked between the sheets, leaving a toasty trail that lingers just long enough to lull you into a false sense of security before your feet inevitably find the one cold spot. Of course, comfort has its quirks. You've invested in the best linens money can buy, but there's always the chance that last week's bargain at the market was actually woven by a distant cousin with a grudge. Occasionally, a feather pokes through, reminding you that even privilege isn't without its sharp edges. And as you pull the heavy curtains around the bed for warmth and privacy, you listen for the comforting or mildly alarming clink of valuables, locked securely in the bedside chest. The night is not entirely your own. Even as you close your eyes, the city outside keeps humming. There's the creak of canal boats returning late, the distant echo of laughter, and if the wind is right, the scent of someone else's late-night snack wafting in through the shutters. Sometimes you hear the bark of a canal dog defending its territory, or the clatter of hooves as an important guest makes a dramatic exit from a neighboring ball. Occasionally, there's the distinctive sound of your neighbor's ill-conceived fireworks display meeting a roof tile. And then, just as you're about to drift off, the doubts begin. Did you remember to lock the spice cupboard? Will your latest investment in rhubarb futures pay off, or will you end up the punchline at the coffee house? Are your gables sufficiently decorative? Or is the Van Loon family plotting a surprise architectural upgrade? The fears of the fabulously wealthy are both unique and universal, a blend of real risk, and the knowledge that the higher you rise, the farther you have to fall. Sleep, when it finally arrives, is a carnival of dreams and anxieties. Some nights you're hosting a banquet where the cheese never runs out and your neighbors clap enthusiastically at your every word. Other nights you're being chased through the tulip fields by an army of accountants or locked in a never-ending game of whist with the tax collector. There's always a sense that something important is just out of reach. One more deal, one more party, one more perfectly fluffed pillow before satisfaction. Still, there's an undeniable coziness to it all. The ritual of winding down, dismissing the last servant, tucking away the last letter, double-checking that the chamber pot is where it should be, wraps you in a sense of accomplishment or at least X. And as the city's church bells toll out the hours, you pull the covers tight, count your blessings and your coins, and drift into that strange, sweet half-sleep where all worries melt away. At least until the housekeeper wakes you up for another day of schemes, deals, and very competitive cheese tastings. For now, the silk sheets cocoon you. The world can wait until morning. If you're lucky, your dreams tonight will be full of prosperity, peace, and maybe, just maybe, a cheese that never molds. Finally, you ponder what it's all for. Your fortune, your legacy, your portrait that makes you look 20 years younger. You hope someone remembers your name for more than just the time you fell in the canal at your own birthday party, lying beneath velvet canopies and silk sheets, listening to the slow drip of canal water outside and the faint ticking of the family clock. You drift into that peculiar twilight where reflection takes over from ambition. The canal houses you built, the fortunes you chased, and the parties you hosted. Will any of it outlast the latest fashion in wigs or the next tax on imported cheese? The question isn't just philosophical. In Amsterdam, legacy is a family business. You think of your ancestors, immortalized in oil and oak frames, their stern faces peering down from the walls. Some built the house, others just lived in it, but all left a trace, if not in money. Then in family stories, disputed heirlooms, and the occasional haunting rumor, you remember the tales of your great-grandfather, the one who first traded herring for silks and bought a canal house so tall the neighbors still complain about the shadow it casts. His story is retold at every family gathering, but mostly as a warning about risky investments and slippery ladders. Still, there's pressure to leave something more than a cautionary tale. You want your name spoken with admiration, not as the punchline of a joke involving flamingo tongues and ill-timed fireworks. So you set about building your own legend, endowing orphanages, commissioning art, perhaps even writing a treatise on the ethical importation of nutmeg. You hope your descendants will point to the family crest over the fireplace and say that was the clever one, not that was the one who lost a warehouse to gambling debts and peacock maintenance. The process of cementing your legacy is predictably full of paperwork and paranoia. Wills are drafted, revised, and drafted again. Lawyers are summoned, fees are paid, and then paid again because you suspect they're billing by the candle. Your heirs are carefully coached. Don't trust anyone who says easy money. Avoid lawyers who smile too much and under no circumstances agree to invest in the next big thing in rhubarb. But you know that legacy is about more than money. You want to pass on your reputation for shrewdness, your flair for garden parties, your secret recipe for herring tartlets. Maybe if you're lucky, your great-grandchildren will keep the portrait that flatters you outrageously, or at least refrain from hiding it in the attic behind a particularly ugly Delft vase. And then there are the stories, your true inheritance to the future. The legendary party where you bested the mayor in a cheese tasting. The fateful day you bought that extra window, sparking a neighborhood rivalry that lasted a generation. The time you accidentally hired a Swedish opera singer instead of a chef and just went with it, because adaptability is the soul of Amsterdam. You hope these tales will be told and retold, growing slightly more impressive with each telling. As you finally drift toward sleep, there's comfort in knowing that whatever history remembers, you played your part in this city of dreamers and schemers. Maybe your name will grace a canal bridge, or maybe it will linger only in the memory of those who loved you, or at least tolerated your taste in wallpaper. Either way, you've left your mark on ledgers, on the skyline, on generations of mildly exasperated children. And if all else fails, you'll always be the one who made falling into the canal look almost stylish. In the end, maybe that's legacy enough. You wake up one morning to distant church bells and a slightly more nervous housekeeper than usual. There's talk of the pestilence making its way up from Rotterdam, and suddenly nobody's shaking hands, just elaborate hat-tipping and quick prayers to St. Anthony. Being rich doesn't mean you're safe. It just means you get a private doctor who recommends leeches and a change of wig. You contemplate the odds of survival, weigh them against the odds of making it through dinner without someone sneezing into the soup, and decide to triple up on the Senate commanders. For all the marble floors and gold-framed mirrors, plague makes even the most opulent canal house feel drafty and vulnerable. News spreads faster than the disease itself, ricocheting from the kitchen, maid to the merchant's wife, to the jittery coffee house crowd before the sun is even fully up. Nobody knows quite how the pestilence works. Bad air, evil humors. And if you ask your cousin the herbalist, a suspicious overabundance of French cheese are all blamed in equal measure. Your house, usually a hive of servants and social calls, suddenly feels like a fortress. The front door is kept bolted. Visitors arrive with suspicion, and every package from the market is doused in vinegar, just in case. Your family physician is on permanent retainer. He arrives in a cloud of herbal fumes and conflicting advice. He might suggest you wear a clove-stuffed mask, or perhaps simply drink more gin. Medicine, after all, is equal parts art and wishful thinking in this century. The wealthier you are, the more creative your preventative measures. Scented commanders dangle from your neck and wrists, stuffed with cloves, rosemary, and anything else that smells less offensive than the canals in August. The theory is simple. If you can't see the pestilence, at least you shouldn't have to smell it. You place bouquets of lavender on window sills, hang amulets over the nursery, and instruct the footman to ring the bell 3 extra times for good luck. Social life grinds to a halt. Dinners are canceled, balls postponed, and the city's famed canal concerts go silent. Nobody wants to risk the ignominy of being the plague vector who ruined spring. Instead, the city's wealthy retreat indoors, sending polite regrets to their rivals, and developing an impressive collection of excuses for why they can't possibly attend even the most lavish of gatherings. Doctor's orders, you say, though in truth, you just don't trust anyone who coughs during grace. At home, the paranoia seeps into every corner. Servants are instructed to wash their hands with lye, which leaves them both terrified and mildly flammable, and no one is allowed in or out without a thorough visual inspection for rashes, blotches, or suspicious sneezes. You consider moving to the country, but remember the estate is downwind from a sheep farm, and last year's hay fever still haunts your dreams. If someone in your social circle falls ill, the rumor mill goes into overdrive. Who visited whom? Did they touch the butter churn at the bakery? Was their dog looking off last Thursday? Theories multiply. Meanwhile, the city's doctors, priests, and amateur healers offer up a dizzying array of cures: leeches, fasting, morgine, bathing in rose water, wearing red silk undergarments, and for those truly desperate, a brisk walk around the block while holding your breath. Through it all, you try to maintain the illusion of control. You keep up appearances, polish the silver, and pen letters to distant relatives, assuring them that yes, Amsterdam is still the center of the civilized world. And no, you haven't seen a rat in the pantry since Tuesday. At night, though, you light extra candles, listen to the quiet city, and wonder whether the latest scare will pass as quickly as the last, or if this is the one everyone will be talking about for decades to come. And in the morning, you put on your best wig, spritz on enough perfume to mask a cheese market, and remind yourself that in Amsterdam, survival is as much about optimism and showmanship as it is about actual medicine. If all else fails, you can always blame the French. You're reviewing your investments, tulip shares, East India stock, a suspiciously lucrative spice monopoly. When there's a knock at the door, word is the bank down the street might be experiencing liquidity challenges, which is 18th century code for your money is already on someone else's boat to Java. You send a servant to stand in line just in case, but you're not worried. You've got gold coins stashed in at least 3 secret places, 2 of which you actually remember. This is the financial circus of 1700s Amsterdam. High stakes, low trust, and the kind of creative accounting that would make even your most ambitious cousin blush. Your fortune might be counted in shares, caros, and elaborate promises scribbled on parchment. But everyone knows that nothing is certain except the inevitability of someone else's bad decisions ruining your afternoon. The first sign of trouble is always the same. Someone's cousin's neighbor claims they try to withdraw their life savings and were offered a cup of coffee instead of cash. A little nervous laughter, a little surely not our bank. But before you know it, the word spreads like spilled gin at a wedding. There's a faint rising panic in the streets as wigs are straightened, coins are counted, and a stampede of well-dressed men suddenly remember urgent business near the teller's window. You watch from your canal house, one eye on the street and the other on your ledgers. It's a parade of anxious investors elbowing their way through the doors of the city's grandest banking halls. Some clutch handkerchiefs, others far more serious clutch pistols. You send your most diplomatic servant armed with strict instructions to retrieve as much gold as possible and not to come back with just a pamphlet on long-term patience. Inside the bank, the scene is a blend of farce and tragedy. The manager, usually the picture of composure, now sweats visibly through his ruffled cravat, trying to assure the crowd that everything is under control. Behind the counter, clerks count and recount coins, each one vanishing from the vault with the air of someone watching a family heirloom disappear at auction. Polite society quickly devolves into pointed elbows, raised voices, and a great deal of side-eye. Back at home, you do what any prudent Amsterdamer would do. Count your own hidden reserves. There's a strong box beneath the staircase, the pouch behind the fake book in the library, and the absolutely secret stash that the housekeeper definitely knows about. You contemplate hiding a few more coins in the flour jar, but last time the cook nearly baked them into a loaf of bread, and you'd prefer to keep your dental bills reasonable. For those with even more reason to worry, there are contingency plans. Some quietly dispatch trusted friends to withdraw funds from banks across the city just in case. Others start investing in tangible assets, artwork, gold plate, that unreasonably large cheese wheel, anything less likely to sink en route to the colonies. By midday, the city is buzzing. Coffee houses overflow with theories, accusations, and the odd optimist still insisting this is all just a misunderstanding. The local newspaper hastily prints a reassuring editorial, which everyone reads and promptly ignores. If your neighbor looks a little too smug, you suspect he's already withdrawn his cash and is now waiting to buy up your warehouse at a bargain if things really go south. In the end, most bank runs end not with a bang, but with a whimper and a collective vow never to trust bankers again, at least until the next dividend payment arrives. Some fortunes are saved, others are lost, and everyone pretends they weren't nervous at all. You reward your servant for standing in line all day, even though he only managed to bring home an IOU and a bruised ego, and go to bed, grateful for your secret stash, and for living in a city where liquidity challenges just mean it's time to hide your gold in yet another place you'll forget by Christmas. A sudden toothache has you calling for the family physician who arrives with a black bag full of terrifying implements and a cheerful disregard for pain relief. You're treated to a blend of herbal compresses, questionable syrups, and a brief lecture about humors. The highlight, a diagnosis that involves your horoscope, your urine color, and possibly the phase of the moon. You're assured you'll live, but you still consider writing a will just in case. In 1700s Amsterdam, medicine is a game of chance, and the odds aren't usually in your favor. For all the city's wealth, innovation, and trade in exotic goods, healthcare is equal parts ancient wisdom, wild guesswork, and whatever happened to be trending at the last guild meeting. A visit from the doctor is as likely to cure your ailment as it is to make you miss the days when ignorance was bliss. Your physician arrives impeccably dressed with a wig slightly askew from his latest house call. His bag is stuffed with odd-smelling ointments, dried herbs, and an impressive collection of metal tools that look suspiciously like torture devices. He greets you with professional enthusiasm, squints thoughtfully at your swollen cheek, and immediately asks whether you've been eating too many moist foods, or perhaps standing near a draft while Jupiter was in retrograde. Examinations are thorough, if eccentric. He takes your pulse for the drama, peers at your tongue for the story, and asks personal questions that sound more like the opening lines of a bad novel. Have you been brooding lately? Any recent heartbreak? Did you see a black cat at the fish market? He inquires about your last 3 dinners, not out of medical necessity, but because he's always on the lookout for recipe ideas. Then comes the diagnosis, a delicate balance of medical tradition and creative flair. The doctor expounds on the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. According to him, your toothache is a sign that your humors are in tragic disarray. The remedy might involve herbal pick-uses applied hot for maximum discomfort, a syrup of questionable origin guaranteed to stimulate the spirits, and if things look grim, a vigorous blood letting to rebalance the system. You try to look grateful as he sharpens his lancet on a piece of cheesecloth. If you protest, he assures you these are the latest methods from Paris, or at least from a Parisian barber who once visited Rotterdam. There are other treatments: leeches, nature's little helpers, a diet of barley water and dry toast, or even a week of total silence, your spouse's favorite prescription. For the particularly unlucky, a tooth is extracted with a set of pliers last cleaned during the previous plague scare. You clutch the armrest and try not to think about infection, sepsis, or the fact that the nearest hospital is also where they keep the city's most interesting medical specimens. Of course, there are alternatives. Apothecaries offer a dizzying array of remedies: herbal pills, imported powders, miracle tonics, and snake oil that probably contains neither snakes nor oil. Your friends swear by home cures: a puss of onions, a compress of old cheese, or simply bathing twice a year, whether you need it or not. Some days you wonder if your odds might be better just taking a brisk walk and hoping for the best. Still, the doctor leaves you with a sense of security, if only because he charges a small fortune for his visit. He scribbles a note for the apothecary, promises to return in a week, or whenever your neighbor's gout flares up, and assures you that you're not the worst case I've seen today. As you sip your dubious syrup and try to ignore the throbbing in your jaw, you make a mental note to finally update your will. Maybe start eating fewer figs and definitely stay away from drafty windows. In the end, medicine in Amsterdam is a mixture of superstition, tradition, and a hearty dose of good luck. If you're fortunate, you recover with nothing more than a story to tell at the next dinner party. If not, at least you'll have contributed to the city's ever-growing collection of medical curiosities. Either way, you can rest easy, at least until your next mysterious ache appears. As a member of the elite, it's not enough to have a dog or a cat. You need something exotic. Maybe a monkey in a ruffled collar, a parrot who can curse in 3 languages, or a pair of pigeons with their own velvet-lined cage. Today, your neighbor stops by to show off his new Persian guinea pig, and you pretend to be impressed while discreetly feeding your own squirrel a stolen almond under the table. In 1700s Amsterdam, the art of pet ownership is less about companionship and more about turning your home into a living catalog of global conquest. The well-to-do compete to see who can acquire the rarest, weirdest, or most ostentatious creature. Dogs are fine, of course. Every canal house needs a canal dog, both as a guard and as a deterrent to overly ambitious burglars. But a dog is just the beginning. To really keep up with your peers, your menagerie must have international flair. Step into your parlor, and you'll find a small zoo on display. Monkeys from Africa, parrots from South America, turtles from the Far East, all navigating an obstacle course of Dell vases and priceless carpets. Some pets are conversation starters, like the Italian greyhound who wears a custom-made woolen coat. Others are simply status symbols meant to impress guests with your shipping connections and your willingness to spend a fortune feeding creatures with extremely specialized diets. Birds are especially popular. Pigeons, for example, are not the grimy street birds you might picture, but specially bred and meticulously housed. Their cages lined with velvet, and their diets supplemented with candied seeds. If you're truly ambitious, you might invest in a pair of doves for peace, a raven for intellect, or a peacock for pure, unfiltered drama. The annual pigeon pageant is a highlight of the social calendar. Part beauty contest, part covert trading session, part excuse for your neighbor to complain that your pigeons are singing too early in the morning. But if birds are for status, monkeys are for spectacle. The right monkey dressed in tiny pants, trained to pick pockets or offer a bow, can steal the show at any gathering and possibly your guest jewelry. These creatures, imported at no small risk or expense, are both endearing and terrifying. Capable of disrupting dinner parties with a well-placed shriek or an acrobatic leap onto the dessert table, their popularity naturally leads to fierce rivalry. Who is the cleverest, best dressed, or most linguistically gifted monkey? Bonus points if yours can play a card game, or at minimum cheat convincingly. The parrot, meanwhile, is both companion and chaos agent, taught to mimic everything from household gossip to your least favorite relative's laugh. It occupies a place of honor by the window, terrifying passing children and delighting visitors with off-color remarks in at least 3 languages. There's no better way to show off your global connections or your questionable sense of humor. Of course, there are less traditional pets, too. Some families keep tortoises, squirrels, or even ferrets, all justified as gifts from abroad. The more bizarre, the better. Hedgehogs in gilded cages, salamanders in glass jars, or the mysterious Persian guinea pig that might in fact be an unusually round rat. The line between pet and pest is blurry, but as long as you can show it off during tea, it counts. The upkeep is considerable. Servants are tasked with feeding, grooming, and frequently rescuing pets from precarious situations. Special diets are imported, cages are cleaned daily, and the occasional runaway monkey results in a citywide manhunt, usually ending with apologies and a new set of curtains. Veterinary advice is rudimentary, often involving herbal remedies, homegrown wisdom, or in a pinch, the family doctor's universal tonic, which works equally well on parrot, monkey, and hypochondriac uncle. So, as your neighbor leaves, smugly confident in his new acquisition, you stroke your squirrel and mentally plot your next addition. Will it be a miniature deer? An owl? Perhaps something so exotic, even the East India Company will raise an eyebrow. In Amsterdam, pet ownership isn't just about affection. It's about keeping your name at the top of the guest list. In your home, the most talked about menagerie on the canal, you need to answer nature's call. And you're reminded yet again that even the richest houses in Amsterdam have only the most primitive of chamber pots and communal privies. You weigh your options. Brave the drafty outhouse at the end of the garden, or trust the new night soil man not to gossip about what he finds in your bucket. Modern plumbing decades away. Dignity also questionable. Let's not sugarcoat it. The most exclusive address on the Heraft won't save you from the realities of 18th century sanitation. Your luxurious canal mansion full of silk gold leaf and gleaming Delftware is still fundamentally a marvel of inconvenience when it comes to doing your business. There's a porcelain chamber pot tucked discreetly under the bed, painted with little blue windmills if you're lucky, cracked and vaguely threatening if you're not. If you're feeling fancy, it matches the wash basin and the candlesticks. If not, at least it's clean, probably. There are rules, of course. Etiquette dictates that nobody talks about chamber pots, even though every guest knows exactly where theirs is stashed. Emptying is a daily ritual for servants who draw lots to see who gets the short straw. Literally and figuratively, You try not to think about the poor scullery maid shuffling down the stairs at dawn, arms full of yesterday's undignified history, hoping no one notices her on the way out. Upstairs, you do your best to forget about what happens next. If you're feeling brave or simply desperate, you make the trek to the outdoor privy. It's an adventure every time, weather permitting. You bundle up, sneak through the garden, and hope you don't slip on a mossy path. The outhouse itself is a ramshackle wooden structure, breezy enough in winter to give you second thoughts about ever drinking tea again. You wonder, not for the first time, if anyone has actually managed to enjoy the view of the canal while shivering on the seat. Doubtful. And then there's the night soil man, that unsung hero of urban hygiene. He's paid to come under cover of darkness, collect the contents of Amsterdam's collective embarrassment, and haul it away to a fate no one really wants to contemplate. Some nights he's cheerful, sharing news from across the city. Other nights he's surly, particularly if he's been forced to navigate 3 flights of stairs and a particularly tricky corner with a sloshing bucket. The only thing more terrifying than his arrival is the prospect of him sharing your family's dietary secrets with the neighbors. Blackmail by bucket, a very real threat. Of course, all this drama is just the rich man's version. Down by the docks and in the crowded alleys, communal privies mean long lines, little privacy, and more urban legends than you could ever hope to recount at a dinner party. Gossip abounds about what's lurking at the bottom of the pit, and there's always a tale of someone's hat, or worse, getting lost forever. Even here, the wealthy have an edge. At least you have your own pot, your own outhouse, and if you're clever, a window that opens just far enough for emergency midnight solutions. You dream of modern plumbing, of hidden pipes, flushing toilets, and the freedom to go about your business without logistical planning or existential dread. But for now, you make do with perfumed sachets, strategically placed windows, and the hope that if you're ever caught carrying your own chamber pot to the maid's closet, you'll have a suitably witty excuse. Still, you have to admire the city's ingenuity. Water flows in from the Amstel, waste floats out, and somehow everyone manages to survive with their dignity mostly intact. You end each day with a silent prayer. May the chamber pot be empty, the outhouse unoccupied, and the night soil man discreet. And may history move just a little faster, so the next generation can spend more time choosing wallpaper and less time plotting safe passage to the privy. So, as the candle light flickers on your silk wallpaper and you finally settle beneath a mountain of feather beds, let's take a gentle moment to reflect. Tonight, you survived another day in 1700s Amsterdam as one of the filthy rich, a city of staggering fortune, questionable plumbing, endless cheese, and enough social scheming to fill 100 canals. You navigated a world where fortunes were made on tulips. Social status depended on the height of your wig, and even the simple act of getting dressed required a small army and a strong sense of irony. It wasn't all golden coins and canal houses. Sure, you ate well, dressed loud, and threw parties that could wake the dead, but there was always the low hum of anxiety over taxes, theft, the next bank collapse, or simply what the neighbors thought about your garden gnomes. Beneath all the extravagance, there was that universal historical struggle, staying one step ahead of disaster, be it financial, medical, or just a dinner party gone sideways. Still, you can't help but admire the resilience of these canal kings and queens, their relentless hustle, and their ability to look perfectly composed, while their entire financial future balanced on a crate of nutmeg. They built a city out of marshland, ruled the world's trade, and then stayed up all night worrying about whether they bought enough blue and white plates. People are absurdly persistent like that then and now. So, as you drift off to sleep, wrapped in your modern comforts, hot water, electricity, a bed that isn't stuffed with straw, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to history's overachievers, the sleep-deprived, overdressed, and occasionally underbathe rich folks of 18th century Amsterdam. Their struggles were real, their victories sometimes ridiculous, and their legacy, well, it's proof that humanity has always been equal parts hopeful, stubborn, and just a little bit silly. Rest easy knowing that your greatest worry tonight might be snoring too loud. Not whether your house is tall enough to impress the neighbors, or if your chamber pot is about to become a topic of local gossip. Good night, and may your dreams be as extravagant and as peaceful as a merchant's canal at sunrise.